tone, and body language. The pundit highlights how her composure seems inconsistent with the gravity of her previous assertions, becomes a subject of further discussion. While some viewers see control, others perceive strength. And that division is captured in the transcript. Without picking a side, it does decide to emphasize timing. Because Andes isn't speaking in public while Tamar is handling promotions and interviews. The transcript, his name flows through the narrative like a stream beneath the surface dot. There is no official statement or counter. Additionally, that's where the notion of a vicious attack starts to change into reputation warfare rather than actual violence. It is clearly framed by the commentator. If the public was permitted to hold a single belief without promptly correcting it, would make anyone associated with that idea feel threatened. The transcript implies that, from Mendeecees' point of view, the scenario was exposure not physically, but socially, digitally, and emotionally. Depending on how viewers understand it, exposure without protection. Exposure without protection. Exposure in the absence of context. Additionally, people don't always react quietly when they feel unfairly exposed. A tightening coil of expectation marks the end of the section. Tamar is still talking. The narrative is still evolving. Keeping an eye on things. Moreover, now, Mendeecees' name is inextricably linked to a night that nobody can really describe, because control no longer belongs to the individual who initiated a narrative once it is out into the wild. Whoever chooses to reply next owns it, because there is more than simply opinion buried in the transcript. The pressure really starts to mount when the discussion returns to that night instead of performance, music, and family. Sometimes Tamar's own statements serve as proof rather than an explanation. There are times when hesitancy, tone, and phrase work more than any charge. Read aloud is Tamar's social media post in which she describes being discovered in a pool of blood, claims she nearly died and doesn't even understand what took place. The line that makes all the difference is this one. I had no idea what happened to me. It touches down weighty, final, not nor frantic. Additionally, the internet handles those words like an open file once they are published. If she is unaware of what transpired, then someone else has to. She came very close to death. Then it was caused by something or someone. Additionally, if people begin looking for names at the borders of the story when she refuses to reveal who was present, Mendeecees enters the picture at that point, not by way of a charge or a declaration made by Tamar, but by making that distinction clear, which is important. According to the commenter, Tamar apparently went home with Mendeecees and another buddy rather than by herself. The entire evening is reframed by that one clarification. All of a sudden, the tale is no longer floating in a vacuum. It has a timeline, proximity, and despite the words' purported heavy lifting, viewers are drawn to it because it serves as the first tangible anchor in a story that is primarily based on feeling. From this point on, the tension builds slowly but steadily, demonstrates how Tamar starts to focus more narrowly rather than elaborating on that parallel. She admits what happened. She admits to being afraid. She admits to being hurt. However, she responds more succinctly and deliberately when interviewers ask for clarification. Tamar claims she's getting well and doesn't want to talk about what happened. This is now where the public's sympathy starts to diverge. Boundaries, trauma, and self-defense are heard by some viewers. Others hear narrative control, stratagem, and avoidance. And after that break, mistrust reinterprets every phrase that came before it. She is not directly accused of lying by the critic. Rather, he challenges constancy. He draws attention to how the narrative is gradually evolving. No single version is significantly different, which is why that statement is important. However, the unease is caused by a series of tiny changes. It's a scary post to start. After that, there is quiet. Then it's I'm not sure. Then it's I'd rather not discuss it after. Then promo dot comes back. Additionally, the strain shifts outward as Tamar tightens her story. The transcript claims that Mendeecees becomes the subject of internet rumors because 2. Tamar's lack of clarification rather than anything he verifies. Viewers start to wonder why his name can get very close to the timeline, but is never addressed directly. Why, despite the association, does she verbally remove herself? Frustration is said to emerge at that point, not in a confrontational manner. Although the transcript makes no such assertion in the form of rage, what starts as a severe attack turns into a meta act due to defensiveness and an attack on motive intent. Additionally, the transcript provides back this interpretation. In an interview, Tamar claims that he was paid to video and that she hardly knew him. This statement is like adding gasoline to a fire that is already raging, because viewers have already heard several accounts of how connected or disconnected they were. Additionally, people interpret someone's minimization of a relationship that others perceive as more involved as denial rather than distancing. The pundit freely admits that he is unable to handle everything. She claims that it is 100% true because of these inconsistencies. Not because he says he knows the truth, but rather because the framing is unstable. When terror is involved, that's what the public seeks for. Here, the purported response from Mendeecees is interpreted as anger instead of guilt. Online comments cited in the transcript state that he was incensed that his name was being implied while she stayed ambiguous. Enraged that a tale he didn't was being read to him. According to his purported viewpoint, Tamar's silence isn't impartial. It's detrimental because speculation endures longer the longer she delays. Proof is not speculation. All it requires is proximity. This is further supported by the transcript's revisitation of the medical scare, and Tamar claims that everything is well and that she is feeling better. Although this seems comforting on the surface, it causes another alienation for viewers. Without, how do you go from "I almost died" to "things are good"? The story's most perilous aspect is that missing midsection. And that's precisely where Mendeecees' rage is supposed to erupt. Not because he is specifically charged, but rather because the narrative enables the viewer to assume, which enables them to envision and fill in the blanks with his name. The commentator even raises the question of whether the post, the stillness, the entire arc, and the fresh focus were all. The commentator queries whether this might be a project promotion of some kind. Tamar is not accused of fabricating trauma in this idea. Rather, it raises concerns about incentive and time. And every response, including Mendeecees, becomes suspicious when motive is called into question. Spectators are reacting to when they call his behavior brutal is not violence. It's intensity. It's rage. It's the emotional impact of someone who feels like he's being forced against his will. The story revolves around survival. This circumstance feels explosive. Reputation is the focus of Mendeecees' purported response. And the two clash in a public setting where subtlety is not fashionable. Outrage does. What transpired that evening is never confirmed in the transcript. It never places blame, but it does demonstrate how, when magnified online, narrative gaps may act as charges. And one thing is evident at the conclusion of this stage. Finding facts is no longer the goal of this. It concerns who determines who is responsible for the quiet and how much it costs. At this point in the narrative, the harm is no longer speculative. It's already happening in real time. Because what begins as an emotional post becomes a cycle of statement, quiet, conjecture, and reaction. The transcript claims that once that loop solidifies, no one is truly in control. Mendeecees, not Tamar, nor even attempting to slow it down. The internet is already in the lead. It is evident from the transcript that there is no clarity following the initial shock of Tamar's message. It's interpretation-based escalation. The interviews are replayed. They separate sentences. They contrast remarks from the past with those from the present. And gradually, the question of why this keeps changing takes precedence to her. Increases at that point. The story of the pundit is constantly evolving. Gradually, it's not presented as a gotcha moment, but with a twist, since when a narrative develops without explanation, viewers do not interpret that as therapeutic. As a revision, they read it. Tent is questioned once revision course. The text demonstrates growing emphasis on self-determined boundaries and mental health. These themes recur in conversations. But the most explosive aspect of her previous post that she almost died remains unanswered. The message claims she doesn't know what happened and describes those two tones are incongruous to viewers. On the one hand, injuries are serious. Conversely, there is the serenity of deflection. Additionally, Tamar posted this on social media in between medical scares. Everyone keeps phoning me, and to be honest, I'm having a hard time writing this. Talk no more. I'm so frail. On Sunday, I came dangerously close to death. My friend had a facial injury, and I was discovered in a pool of blood. It gets worse as the days pass. I lost some teeth, broke my nose, and became immobile. My perspective on life has completely changed. My mental journey starts as my health improves. Please actually pray for me. I have no idea. The internet begins to give positions in between those extremes. Scapegoat, deflector, villain, and victim. Mendeecees' position gets more unstable at this point. Tamar did not go up to her house by herself. According to the transcript that was just clarified, Mendeecees and another friend are said to have accompanied her up there. The explanation that she's home with him and another buddy, rather than by herself, becomes the silent focal point of the controversy. It's not yelled. It's not highlighted, but it's also never taken back. And since implication doesn't require repetition, that's plenty. She only needs to learn now that she is aware that Funky stated, "Don't say anything." She now says, "I don't want to say. Don't insinuate. Don't say anything because I'm going to respond." Must exist once and not be contested. According to the transcript, he supposedly becomes angry at this point due to cumulative harm, remarks accusing him, others presuming he was involved, rather than a single accusation. Others are requesting explanations that he never provided. And crucially, Tamar fails to openly refute those presumptions. Rather, she takes a step back. Tamar claims she doesn't want to discuss what happened. This makes sense to certain viewers. For others, a blatant sign of what might have happened to her. As someone who has stated that anything can happen in your home, I was, and I told you all. God forbid. However, the more that as this goes on, the more she sort of avoids speaking. The more annoying it is because it makes me wonder if this was a promo. At this point, silence doesn't feel protective. It seems to be picky. By asking why this narrative can be shared, the commentator specifically draws attention to this. Yes, that is a lot to say. However, things in its most dramatic form, but it is unclear when the repercussions for others materialize. This is where the true meaning of the term brutal attack emerges. Not violence, not fists, but reputational force based on responses mentioned in the transcript. Mendeecees is said to have verbally lashed out at the journalist who was posing follow-up questions. "I didn't abandon anyone. You didn't intend to post it, and I visited the hospital." His name is inexplicably linked to a near-death story. Angry that he is being talked about as a shadow in the trauma narrative of another person. Additionally, anger is viewed as a confession in online society. The trap is that because when someone reacts emotionally, the audience begins to discern motivation rather than context. Some claim that if he's upset, he's concealing something. If he doesn't speak, some claim it proves guilt. Once conjecture solidifies, there is no winning stance. Another destabilizing component is also introduced in the transcript. Tamar is constantly promoting new music and projects. While all of this is going on, interviews are ongoing. There are performances taking place. The headlines are always interesting. She's on the marketing trail for Heartache Retrograde, the pundit observes. Skepticism is fueled by that overlap. On a stage, the camera doesn't open. It begins with a press run and a narrative that is constantly changing. Okay, enough about that. She is featured in the promo. Minute. Tamar is discussing the future of the Braxton, promoting her new project, attempting to sound realistic. The talk also resumes the following minute. The internet can't stop talking about that tragic night. She claims that the night, she claims that the night changed everything. The night that became a public inquiry right away. After reading Tamar's story, I nearly passed away on Sunday. I was discovered in a blood pool. I had no idea what happened to me. That unmarried. All right? After then, when discussing this incident, you wish to alter the story. Line is like a siren. Because when someone says, I nearly died, I don't even know what happened. He acknowledges, and the ensuing silence overpowers any explanation. And the spiral begins there. Everyone is attempting to fill in the blanks with their own interpretation of reality through comments, threads, and reaction videos. This is why it feels more like a thriller than a rehash, though. The phrasing softens as she goes from interview to interview. The details become increasingly sparse. A fresh message takes the place of the urgency. Limits and mental well-being. I'd like to talk about it. Promotion doesn't invalidate pain. Rather, it fosters cynicism. Some viewers begin to wonder if the ambiguity itself serves a purpose. The tension is retained, and whether unresolved tension keeps it locked. Everyone involved then becomes collateral. The commentator even speculates that, whether on purpose or not, the incident's framing may be enhancing her prominence. And that recommendation intensifies a situation that is already emotionally charged because, from the viewpoint of someone who is drawn into the narrative, that feels like exploitation. Here, the purported verbal assault is reframed as a turning point. Reactive rather than deliberate or purposeful. The transcript highlights over and time again that the events upstairs are never explained in detail. People aren't responding to the facts when the absence becomes the most prominent aspect of the narrative later in the evening or after the group broke up. They are responding to voids. Such gaps are risky, particularly when the narrative includes harm, anxiety, and the line, I nearly died. When such remarks are made public, everyone associated with the timeline is scrutinized due to proximity rather than proof. When the transcript goes over the follow-up questions again, it confirms this. The reporter questions why she left people in the dark after posting such a serious message. That particular instance is significant because it demonstrates that even impartial interviewers were aware of the inequality. Whiplash is caused by dramatic disclosure followed by retreat, and whiplash breeds mistrust. Viewers are therefore criticizing not just Mendeecees' actions when he is depicted as responding angrily, but also the system that trapped him in that situation. Because no one is directly answering the same question, this part of the story feels unsteady. Tamar discusses recovery. The pundit discusses constancy. Viewers discuss responsibility. Based on their responses, men talk of being misrepresented. There is no clear overlap in any of those discussions, and every action becomes suspicious once communication breaks down like that. What transpired that evening is not revealed in the transcript. It doesn't prove misconduct. It doesn't justify or minimize anyone's suffering. But it does demonstrate how implication, timing, and silence can work together to create something more harmful than accusation. New information isn't causing the story to escalate at this stage. It's becoming worse due to unsolved strain. And that tension is now having an impact much beyond the initial post. Polarizing audiences, changing reputations, and turning ambiguity into a weapon that no side can fully control. Additionally, once or when the story reaches that point, it doesn't end gently. By the time the story reaches its climax, it is waiting for impact. New revelations are no longer the source of the strain. It stems from their absence. What is left unsaid shapes everything that comes after. This is seen in the transcript in how the same unresolved issue keeps coming up in the dialogue. The public was informed of a terrible incident. Despite the indirect connections between names, no conclusive account has ever been able to close the loop. Rather, the narrative continues to breathe. growing via interpretation, response, and emotion. At this point, the repercussions become apparent. She has yet to provide a clear indication of what might have occurred, the commentator points out. That sentence turns into the situation's subdued thesis, because whether or not something awful happened is no longer the question at this point. The fact that she felt hurt, scared, or traumatized is never denied in the transcript. The afterthoughting narrative control is the problem. When a public figure discloses something as serious as waking up hurt and on the verge of death, the distinction matters. The internet naturally demands coherence rather than coherence of details, a feeling that the narrative is aware of its direction. However, the transcript in this instance demonstrates the reverse. The framework is subtly altered with each interview, enough to confuse but not enough to contradict. Moreover, theories are born out of perplexity. This is even explicitly acknowledged in the transcript, which implies that as the narrative progresses, it starts to feel more like repositioning than recovery. The narrative is constantly evolving. Gradually, this perspective alters how all silences are perceived, particularly the quiet surrounding Mendeecees. His presence in the story is now primarily implied. They said nothing more or less than that he was supposedly there earlier, that she wasn't alone, and that other people were there. However, that is sufficient to link his name to the event in the public's consciousness. Furthermore, without any explanation, separation becomes practically impossible once linked. The transcript demonstrates that there is never complete clarification. Retreat is an alternative. She claims she doesn't want to talk about that incident by itself. That limit makes sense. There is no need to explain trauma. However, the refusal to elaborate lands differently in the context of previously stated public pronouncements. Even while there may not be any aim, it feels selected. The last wave of backlash develops here. Viewers start to doubt the decision-making surrounding the tragedy rather than the act itself. Why post first, then take it back? Why let names hover without verification or refutation? Why discuss every topic that comes up? Reality TV, music promotion, and family drama, but the most serious claim is still on hold. Interviewers are shown in the transcript attempting to handle this tactfully, probing without making accusations and requesting follow-ups without insisting on details. The interviewer notes that after posting about almost dying, she stopped interacting with people. Hanging, the tension is wonderfully captured in that moment, which makes it significant. When viewed by millions of people, the result is perplexity rather than animosity or disbelief. Turns into pressure. Here, Mendeecees' purported reaction is explained as a reaction to ongoing ambiguity rather than as a singular outburst. The opinion claims that his annoyance isn't characterized as abrupt. Weeks of conjecture, comments, and linkage with something that no one can adequately explain are described as accumulated dots. He is never accused of violence in the transcript. It never verifies misconduct. In this section, he is never even directly quoted. It does demonstrate how a public narratives might act as accusations without ever being officially classified as such. This phase is hazardous because there is no obvious defense after implication takes the place of accusation. Denial appears defensive. Silence conveys guilt. Anger appears to be incriminating. Every response becomes proof to someone. Timing and optics are another destabilizing issue that is highlighted in the transcript. The entire discussion develops. Tamar, on the other hand, promotes music, participates in performances, and talks about upcoming projects. It has been said that she is promoting her new initiative. Once more, the transcript acknowledges how the overlap confuses perception, but does not accuse her of taking advantage of the situation, because audiences find it difficult to distinguish between authenticity and advertising when they coexist in public approach. Furthermore, the conflict is not merely theoretical. It becomes judgmental. Some spectators interpreted her ongoing appearances as a sign of fortitude. Some perceive them as a diversion. While some perceive healing, others perceive deflection. This division and unsolved splits are reflected in the transcript. harden the dot. The commentary also starts at this point, considering whether the absence of detail turned into a barrier, or a means of communicating without agreeing to suggest, without making accusations, to arouse compassion without taking responsibility for anything that isn't proven. It is presented as conjecture. However, rumors alone have the power to destroy reputations. The transcript even subtly suggests that the story might have survived longer due to uncertainty than clarity. The commenter questions whether it was a project promotion of any kind. That idea by itself is explosive, not because it has been demonstrated, but also because it adds motivation to a narrative that was previously centered only on hurt the dot. Trust erodes as soon as motive enters the debate. And once every previous assertion is re-examined as trust erodes, here's where the story reaches its most precarious phase since, at this time, nobody is truly no longer discussing what transpired. They are discussing why it is being discussed in this manner. The event turns into a secondary. The frame takes precedence. And Mendeecees' weather stays inside that frame in response to its pushing, whether on purpose or not. Back, whether on purpose or not. Back. Additionally, the transcript depicts the commentator focusing on a single shift when Tamar is attempting to proceed, highlighting the names that begin to hover around her story and the name that suddenly alters the mood. The assertion that she didn't return home by herself. Mendeecees and another friend are said to have accompanied her. At that point, the public isn't just wondering what happened, which is when the breaking energy starts to spread online. They want to know who was present before the story turned dark and why it is always presented as an afterthought. The pundit refers to it as backpedaling. He gestures to the way she is ignoring the event. He wonders if the story is being controlled. Additionally, the internet treats Mendeecees' name as a fuse as soon as it appears in the chronology. The insinuation alone is sufficient to compel people to choose sides, not because anything has been confirmed. The headline now reads like a punch. However, the actual assault may not even be physical, because Mendeecees is supposedly connected to the time frame if Tamar revealed her night. The following inquiry becomes inevitable. Who's going to lose it? What occurs if the subject of the tale chooses to respond? As the first section progresses, it becomes evident that the plot doesn't advance. It keeps going around in circles. And each time it reappears, the wording is slightly altered to draw attention. Tamar isn't concealed. She is all over the place. Interviews, press engagements, and discussions about her music, the Braxton, and mental health. However, the transcript makes clear that every time the conversation approaches that evening, something tightens. The explanations become thinner. The sentences get shorter and distance takes the place of information. It is framed early by the commentator. This is selective engagement, not silence. Tamar will discuss trauma in the family. She will discuss poisonous relationships. She will discuss boundaries, regret, and even exploitation. However, in terms of the actual experience, the one she described, she was almost slain by the world. Suspicion begins to arise since she keeps her hands off things. This week became Tamar Week, as explained in the transcript. By volume, not by chance. Various venues, various interviews, and numerous opportunities for clarification. However, clarity never materializes. Rather, repetition is what shows up. The same language, the same emotive frame, and the same departure from practicality. She is not accused of lying by the pundit. He takes a riskier action. He challenges constancy. This isn't happening in a vacuum, he reminded the audience. A social media post went viral prior to the press run and the Entertainment Tonight sit-down. A post so serious that it immediately cast the public as a villain. Tamar was found in a pool of blood, shattered her nose, lost teeth, and had no idea what had happened. Despite the fact that no name was given, not only did that post frighten supporters, but it also sparked conjecture. Additionally, the transcript demonstrates how fast individuals filled up the spaces. The internet apportioned blame without waiting for facts. And at that point, a different name came up. Not by accusing, but by becoming close. Funky Dina got collateral damage first, according to the analyst. He was questioned, accused, and asked for explanations. And it was this pressure that ultimately compelled him to make a public statement in order to clear his own name rather than to expose Tamar. According to the transcript, the story then expands because Funky adds an element that Tamar had not highlighted. She didn't return home by herself. Funky's paraphrase, she went upstairs allegedly with Mendeecees and another friend. Doesn't make any accusations against anyone. However, it does something equally strong. The time frame is altered. The night isn't a closed loop all of a sudden. There are numerous witnesses, numerous people, and numerous unsolved questions in this shared area. At that point, Mendeecees' name starts to cast a shadow on the